President Johnson in Congress. I'll tell you something about Lyndon Johnson. He got things done. There were many, many bills that were passed during his administration, but I want to talk about what happened 5 days after the assassination of President Kennedy. And 5 days after the assassination, President Lyndon Johnson addressed Congress. And he was very, I thought, hospitable to the assassinated president, because during his congressional address 5 days after the assassination, President Johnson asked members of Congress to complete all those programs that were initiated by President Kennedy. So he believed that what President Kennedy had initiated should be completed. And the most notable of the laws that Congress passed to complete the programs initiated by President Kennedy occurred on July 2nd of 1964. July 2nd of 1964. And that was when Congress passed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Very, very important legislative act in our nation's history. And that was the act, as you remember, that Kennedy tried to initiate, which resulted in the March on Washington for support of that bill. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964 required two things. It required two things. It stated that racial discrimination was illegal in the use of federal funds. It stated that racial discrimination was illegal in the use of federal funds. Now what that does is it goes into a broad expansion that federal funds is paying salaries for workers, so you could not discriminate on race because of federal funding being used. So it covered a whole myriad of things. A lot of things are paid with federal dollars, including like the school education you're getting, the books you have, etc. So that really was a broad part of the Civil Rights Act of '64, that racial discrimination would be illegal in the use of federal funds. Second thing it did is it desegregated all businesses. Desegregated all businesses based on race. Desegregated all businesses in the country based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. So the second thing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 did is it desegregated all businesses across the United States, which meant you could not segregate on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. Big, big civil rights bill that was passed in our country's history. And Johnson made sure that the vision that President Kennedy had in civil rights continued. I'm going to give you many, many other laws that were passed during the time Johnson served out the remainder of Kennedy's term. Okay? Now these are laws that Kennedy initiated and Johnson continued with. And some were those of Kennedy's initiation, some were his own ideas. But you can kind of figure it out probably by looking at it. The first law that Johnson passed through Congress during the time he served the remainder of the Kennedy presidency was known as VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. Again, the law was called VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America. Anybody want to guess what that was by listening to the title? Volunteers in Service to America. What's that? Yeah, well, you remember the Peace Corps? The Peace Corps was a foreign volunteer service, right? They went to foreign countries. Basically what VISTA was a domestic Peace Corps, whereas people volunteered to provide chances for people to help, it provided chances for people to help poor people in the United States, just like we were helping poor, underprivileged people overseas. So it really was a domestic Peace Corps, where volunteers came into service to help poor people around our own country and try to provide a better life for them. Another act that was passed was the Wilderness Act of 1964. The Wilderness Act of 1964. Anybody want to guess what that act or law did? or Wilderness Act. Now Mason, you should know this because you're kind of a wilderness guy. What's that law going to do, Mason? Protect what?
Our wilderness, but like establishing the true wilderness areas and like high ranges where you can't touch it with motor vehicles.
Very good, yes, exactly. What it did is it set aside 9 million acres of national forest land and national park land and said this is wilderness. You cannot go in there and camp, you cannot go in there and ride your ATVs, although they didn't have at the time, but motorized vehicles, etc. So the Wilderness Act of 1964 was simply an act that set aside 9 million acres of national forest and national park land, and it designated that as wilderness, and it had some specific rules about what you could and could not do in wilderness area, just like they have today. That's always kind of a fight between the Republicans and the Democrats now, as far as opening up wilderness land to people to use. It's kind of a controversy. Not allowing land to be used by four-wheelers and things like that is really a Democratic idea. It always has been. Okay, President Obama was for protecting the wilderness, whereas maybe Republican people would like to see more opened up. That's kind of how it's been traditionally. Now, very important acts that came out that are affecting you today. It was started by Lyndon Johnson. The first one was the National Defense Education Act. National Defense Education Act. Now, you got to think about this because we have it pretty good. You know, you come to school for free, you get your textbooks paid for and whatnot, you know, meals on trips and different things. Well, what the National Defense Education Act did, for the first time, it gave federal dollars to schools, colleges, and universities. This is where this funding of public education started, with Lyndon Johnson passing the National Defense Education Act, because it gave federal dollars to schools, colleges, and universities. Now, under the National Defense Education Act were two kind of sub-laws that were passed as a result of that. And the first one was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And as you probably understand, they were an umbrella. The National Defense Education Act was an umbrella over the top of these other two. Okay, they're part of the National Defense Education Act. And the first one is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which affects you as you said in your desk today. Because what the Elementary and Secondary Education Act did is it allowed for the use of government money for elementary and high schools to buy textbooks, supplies, lunches, those types of things. And I'll kind of explain that to you a little bit, especially because we're in kind of a situation now where we're taking a big budget cut, are we not? You've all heard about that in Wyoming. This district's going to take a $1.3 million hit. And I'll kind of explain it to you. What the state of Wyoming does is they fund education very well. They basically state for every student that sits in a desk, we get approximately $16,000 a year for you. So if we have 1,000 students in the district, you take that times 16,000, that's what you get for having you here. Now we have more than 1,000, okay? So A and B, average number belonging, is very important because if the district has 1,000 students this year and they have 1,200 students next year, we're going to get 16,000 times 200 more money. But if we have 200 less students next year on A and B, then we get that much money less. Okay? And Wyoming is funded very well, 16,000. When I was in Montana, it was like 6,000. Okay? So that's why Wyoming salaries are higher. Now, when you take a total budget of a school from federal dollars, you know what percent is to pay your employees on that budget? To pay all your employees? What do you want to guess? What percentage do you think it'd be of a total budget?
15.
Pretty close. About 80% of your budget is paying the people that work for your district, and the 20% left over goes to textbooks and those types of things. But it was Lyndon Johnson who passed the National Defense Education Act. Under that, the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, that pays for the things that you get paid for today. So we look at a budget crunch. What's happened is the oil money has kind of gone away a little bit, so they're no longer going to give us that much for each student, and we're all having to make cuts, and this district got a $1.3 million cut. How did they handle that? They offered a $20,000 incentive for anybody that retired, and I have to admire the central administration and Mr. Nicholas for this, because his goal was he did not want to cost people their jobs. It's a tough time to lose a job. So what he did is he offered money for people to retire, and those people that retired, then they just absorbed those other people in there. They didn't replace them and allow people to have their jobs. I thought that was very admirable. But there also will be some cuts in different things as well to get to $1.3 million. That's a lot of money. Health insurance will probably be cut a little bit for employees and some of those things. But that's, what's that?
What is that, like, is an approximate percentage of the school's budget?
Well, I think it's probably, what they say, I should know this, 20% maybe. I think our budget's like 8 or 9 million a year, I guess. So it's a hit. Look, poor old Tensleep's got like a $1.2 million budget, and they got hit almost 300,000. So that's, it's a lot of money for a district. But this whole thing, as we look at it sad now, if it wasn't for Lyndon Johnson and passing this law, you'd be funding your own education. I mean, this is what he did. The other part of the National Defense Education Act was called the Higher Education Act. And it used government money for what? Colleges. So when you apply for financial aid through FAFSA, that type of thing, that's the government helping pay for your college. And that was started with the Lyndon Johnson administration when he finished out the Kennedy presidency by passing the National Defense Education Act, by passing the Higher Education Act, which gave government money and financial aid to college-bound students. Now, I'll tell you kind of an interesting story. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, a lot of people think that if Kennedy would not have been assassinated, he probably never would have gotten this public school money passed. Why? What's that? Well, he was Catholic. And see, there would have been a controversy that he'd have had some, he would have probably, maybe he'd have tried to fund private schools. Now, I should explain that to you. You go to a private school like Carroll College is a Catholic school. BYU, I don't know a lot about, but BYU is an LDS affiliated school. Does it get government money, I wonder? Because it costs a lot to go there. Okay, well, they might get funded, I don't know, but and BYU might not be a totally LDS school, but like, if you go to Carroll College, it's a Catholic school. Do you have to be Catholic to go there? No, but the Catholic school, because it's private, they can't get federal monies. That's why their tuition, like Rocky Mountain College is a Methodist school, so their tuition's like $24,000 a year because they have to charge that because they don't get any federal funding. So private schools are very expensive. They do not get this kind of money, but public schools do. You have private, I don't know of any in Wyoming, but like Billings has Billings Central High School, Catholic school, Butte Central High School. They do not get federal dollars, and so they have to charge tuition. If you go to Billings Central High School in Billings, you pay tuition to go there, $6,000 to $7,000 a year to go to high school. Okay, and that they give scholarships to those who can't afford it. Of course, the Catholic Church gets involved in that, but there are private schools like that in which they get no federal funding, but public schools do. Okay, but anyway, Lyndon Johnson, that was a very important act he passed to help schools. Okay, that's going to take us to the election of 1964. This is kind of an interesting election because what Johnson's going to do is he's going to run for his own term, right? Could he run in 64 and 68? Yes, he could, because he hadn't been elected to a term. So he serves out the rest of Kennedy's term, and he decides that he's going to run for his own presidency. So there's no question at the Democratic National Convention in 1964 who the Democratic nominee is going to be. The only drama at the Democratic National Convention in 64 is who would Lyndon Johnson pick as his running mate. And that was kind of an interesting decision. He picked Senator Hubert H. Humphrey of Minnesota, which you've heard about before. You've heard of him before. He was a candidate member of the election of 1960. He and Kennedy were the Democratic candidates that went to the wire, and finally Humphrey ran out of money and got beat in West Virginia pretty bad in the Protestant state, and Humphrey dropped out. But he was a very successful senator from Minnesota, and Johnson chose him to be his vice presidential running mate. Now, the Republican Party is going to have a lot more difficulty choosing their candidate. If you think about it, Eisenhower was Republican. You had Franklin Roosevelt for almost 4 terms, then you had Harry Truman, Democrat, then you had Eisenhower, Republican, but then you've had John F. Kennedy, and now you've had Lyndon Johnson. So the Republicans haven't been in the mix that much. And during this time of the election of 1964, the Republican Party was really split badly. You had a very strong conservative wing of the Republican Party and a very strong liberal wing. And when you have a party split with a lot of conservatives and liberals, it's very difficult to win an election, and it's hard to pick a candidate. So during the time the Republican Party was badly split, Well, the conservative Republicans around our country really supported Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona. Barry Goldwater of Arizona. And here's a picture of Barry Goldwater right up there, the guy with the glasses on, okay? So they supported Barry Goldwater. This would be the conservative Republicans. Well, Goldwater's going to have a hard time getting the nomination on the first ballot unless they get the support of some of the liberals within the party, okay? And this is going to be kind of a mess. Well, how do you think Senator Goldwater could maybe guarantee nomination on the first ballot, and how would he get liberal support? What's that? Right, he would pick a liberal running mate. And so he kind of gave the liberals the idea that if he was supported by them at the convention, that he would balance the ticket and choose a liberal candidate as his running mate, okay? So, as a result of that, the liberals supported Senator Goldwater, and he was nominated on the first ballot at the Republican National Convention and will be the Republican nominee. However, after his nomination, he chose a conservative running mate in Congressman William Miller. So he gave that impression that he would balance the ticket with a liberal vice presidential candidate, and in the end, after his nomination, he shocked those liberal Republicans by choosing a conservative congressman by the name of William Miller as his running mate. Well, what happened? Pretty simple. What those liberal Republicans do when it came election day? They voted for the Democratic Party. Really a sad story, but as a result of this, the liberal wing of the party was furious, and many liberals voted for Johnson during the election of 1964. This was a butt-kicking. Johnson won 61% of the popular vote. That's a huge margin, really. 61% of the popular vote. There were 538 total electoral votes to be earned, and Johnson earned 486. It was just really a romp. So, as a result of Goldwater's mistake in choosing a conservative running mate, Johnson was easily elected to his own term. He won 61% of the popular vote. He captured 486 of the possible 538 total electoral votes, meaning that Goldwater only received 52. Now, what's important? What's important for a president that's elected? What's he want to have? Congress. Fortunately for Johnson, the Democrats would control both houses of Congress during his term. That would be highly advantageous for him. Highly advantageous. So, now we're going to move into the next subtopic, which is President Johnson's Great Society, his own administration. Everything he's done to this point, he has done during the time that he served the remainder of President Kennedy's term. Now we're going to go into his administration, which is known as the Great Society. And the Great Society consisted of 3 political philosophies. These were the political philosophies of President Johnson. Number 1, he wanted to keep the nation's economy growing strong. Our economy was in pretty good shape at this time, and he wanted to keep the nation's economy growing strong. Now listen to the next 2 and see what you think he's trying to accomplish here. His second political philosophy was to open opportunities tomorrow for all Americans that only a few enjoyed today. He wanted to open opportunities tomorrow for all Americans that only a few enjoyed today. He wanted to open opportunities tomorrow for all Americans that only a few enjoyed today. Open opportunities tomorrow for all Americans that only a few enjoy today. And the third political philosophy of the Great Society was to improve the quality of life for all, not just a chosen few. Number 3, he wanted to improve the quality of life for all, not just a chosen few. So what is the Democratic philosophy at this time? Especially with those last two. It's going to try to provide some equality for people that have been less advantageous over the years. Try to balance the scale a little bit, okay? All right, that'll take us now to important legislation that were passed during the Great Society. During the Great Society. And these are laws that Johnson passed when he served his own term. And one thing he was very concerned about, and he made his top priority when he took his own term on, was medical care for the elderly. He was very concerned. Oh boy, I'll have to tell you a Grandma Durr story. Yes. It's an unbelievable one. But anyway, Johnson's top priority during his own term was the issue of medical care for the elderly. So in July of 1965, President Johnson signed into law the Medicare Bill of 1965, a crucial piece of legislation that still works well today. So in July of 1965, President Johnson signed into law the Medicare Bill of 1965. And this bill provided the following 3 things to people in America. It's important you know this, okay? The Medicare Bill of 1965 provided 3 things to people in America. Number 1, make sure you don't mess this up. All citizens age 65 and older received low-cost hospital